Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking World of Warcraft Classic. Or rather, we're talking World of Warcraft Vanilla, and the unfinished zones that came bundled up in the code of that game. But this video is not some nostalgic frolic down memory lane. Oh no, we're not going to be looking at these places and wistfully thinking, I wonder what this could have been like if they'd had more time and didn't have to scrap it. We're looking at these areas and thinking, what could they do with this in World of Warcraft Classic? Because yeah, that's right Internet, today we are talking Classic Plus, the largely unformed idea floating around the community at the moment that says, hey, I really like Classic and the Classic systems and the way Classic plays. Wouldn't it be really good if in a couple of years, when we've exhausted all the original vanilla content, instead of moving on to the Burning Crusade with all its balance changes and quality of life improvements and new zones and races and stuff, we stayed in Classic and just got new content for that? It's an idea that tends to split opinion straight down the middle. The pros and cons of it are both blindingly obvious. I said in the last weekly reset episode that it was a terrible idea that should be encased in concrete and dumped in the North Sea. Those were actual words that came out of my actual mouth. But for the sake of this video, I want to completely ignore any of those debates, forget whether Blizz should make new content for a potential Classic Plus, and instead ask how Blizz could make new content for Classic Plus. Because here's the thing, OG Vanilla WoW was originally planned to ship with simultaneously a lot more and less content than it eventually did. At one point in development, devs decided that the world as a whole had too short a journey latitudinally, cut Eastern Kingdoms down the middle and just increased its width, which meant a lot of zone designers had to start all over again, and it's the reason why vertical zones like Stranglethorn Vale are so massive in the live game. But a whole lot of content ended up being cut too. Early concept art shows really obvious things like Nazjatar, Kultiras, and the Tomb of Sargeras, things which obviously never made it to that original iteration of the game, but did find their way to players later on. And then there was the stuff that made it past the concept stage and into an actual build, stuff which was famously in the data for players to find if they were clever enough. Stuff like the original Hellfire Peninsula in Outland on the other side of the Dark Portal, originally meant to be a part of Vanilla, thankfully cut and reworked into a whole expansion. Or Mount Hyjal, a zone which was accessible with clever wall jumping in Vanilla, which is obviously unfinished, but also so far along in the build that actually, if you know your way around the actual Mount Hyjal area that was added in Cataclysm, then you can find your way around this one really easily. Also has a cool Archimon skeleton tangled in the roots, which I think is vastly superior to the Cataclysm version. I'm showing you these things now because they are an example of what we won't be talking about in this video. Because I'm not really interested in unfinished vanilla versions of zones that did happen later on in the game's life. If Classic Plus is going to happen, it seems stupid to ask devs to go back and finish Outland or Hyjal or Nazjatar or Uldum, because they did later. In fact, that's why we aren't even going to look at that other famous cut zone, the Dragon Isles. Fascinating though it is, mostly because, well, frankly, I think we'll be seeing that in the live game very soon too. So a Classic Plus version of it is a whole lot less exciting. No, I'm much more interested in the other zones and areas and raid portals littered throughout Vanilla WoW and in the code that never got used, or were in the code for a bit and then disappeared, because there's plenty of them. And if Blizzard really did want to make new content for Classic in the future, they certainly have a wealth of stuff to choose from. And just before we start, a little note about a lot of the footage that I'll be using in this video to actually show you some of these places, because I'll be drawing pretty liberally from the work of Haven Games. Haven did some of the absolute best deep dives into the code of World of Warcraft on YouTube. He wasn't just a great YouTuber and lover of the game, he was also a friend. We were in pretty regular contact. He would always send us any raw footage that we asked him to because he was so awesome, and he even made an entire segment for our 2017 Review of the Year video, even though he was super ill at the time.
Hi Taliesin Evitel, Haven here from Haven Games.
Basically, he was one awesome guy. There's a link to his channel in the description below. I'd like to dedicate this video to him, and we'll be donating the YouTube revenue from this video to cancer research in his honor. So join us as we look at the unfinished and deleted zones of Vanilla WoW and ask, could this be how Blizzard makes Classic Plus? Okay, go, 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 go. So if Blizzard are making new content for Classic Plus, then there's a couple of different forms that could take. New instances like dungeons and raids seem like an obvious direction to head in, and we will be looking at some of those later. But there are also plenty of zones hidden in the code, which Blizz could utilize for one-off long quest chains, either just for fun or maybe as attunements to those new/old instances. Because man, if there is one thing that Vanilla WoW loves, it's attunements, right? Like seriously, if you are ever stuck what to buy Vanilla WoW for its birthday or for Christmas, then just get it some attunements. You can't go wrong with attunements. Vanilla WoW loves attunements, and obviously that means Classic WoW does too. And these two islands would be perfect. Gillijim's Isle and the island of Dr. Lapidis are two zone-sized land masses off the western coast of Stranglethorn. They are visible in the original World of Warcraft intro cinematic and in the comics. And not only that, they were actually in the game until the late alpha stage when they were cut. In fact, right up until Cataclysm, if you swam out into the sea from Stranglethorn, the names of these non-existent zones would still appear on screen as your character zoned into them. So these two locations are prime candidates for any added Classic Plus content, and the fact that they were so nearly in the game means that those alpha builds are incomplete, sure, but a lot more finished than other cut zones you're going to find. Another thing I love about these two zones is that it's pretty fun to try and guess the story that was originally meant to be happening on them too. Gillijim's Island is the smaller of the two, and it's mostly full of standard troll structures and Stranglethorn style lush island forestness, but also signs of human life too, mostly in the form of Alliance shipwrecks along the coastline. The name is clearly a play on Gilligan's Island, which was an old TV show about castaways on a desert island, and that's clearly supposed to be what was going on here too. Little encampments of human castaways trying to survive against the hostile troll natives. And you feel like you could have a lot of fun with that if you were to write new quests for the zone now. Or players could have a storyline helping their new troll friends kill the human infestation from their ancient home and holy sites. Alliance players trying to rescue the crash-landed castaways. Maybe the humans have been there so long that they still think the troll wars are happening and they refuse to leave until they've taken out their enemy. It could be really interesting. And likewise, it's not hard to guess what might be going down on the island of Dr. Lapidis either. This is the larger zone of the two and features bigger troll ruins as well as some proper Alliance structures, notably a big Alliance tower in the center. The Island of Dr. Moreau is an H.G. Wells novel where a brilliant but basically mental scientist conducts experiments on a remote island to create human-animal hybrids. Clearly on the island of Dr. Lapidis, named after original WoW dev Alan Lapidis, who built the Azsgara area, the tower-dwelling scientist has been making troll human hybrids. And okay, here's the thing. That sounds like we're going to need some new models, which kind of goes against the ethos of Classic Plus for me. So how about just some extra big and super mean super troll super soldiers instead, infesting the island? Perhaps completing the attunement quests throughout this island could unlock a regularly spawning extra super troll super soldier world boss in the Kazakh style that needs a guild's worth of players to defeat it for fat loots. Or maybe one of these islands could work as a dungeon with the attunement quests being on the other. The potential is endless, and since these islands have been there since the very beginning, this seems like a great place for any Classic Plus content to start. PvP was a genuine major part of Vanilla Endgame, and I get the feeling it may be even more so in Classic. So how about we dig around in that old code for two previously unfinished battlegrounds to add to the Classic Plus mix. Kalidar was the original name that Blizzard used on their website to describe the island that Teldrassil was grown on, which is now obviously just called Teldrassil, or ex-Teldrassil, whatever. But in early World of Warcraft builds, there was a battleground called Kalidar too, which is kind of interesting because with the Horde base at the top there, and the Alliance base at the bottom, and those three lanes linking them, well, it kind of looks like a MOBA map, right? How was this battleground intended to work? A capture the flag type thing where you steal into your opposition's base like in Warsung Gulch? There are a couple of features on this otherwise empty map, like an observatory and a mine, so maybe a point capture like Arathi. But either way, here is a tight, claustrophobic, intense, pre-existing, unused vanilla PvP map that could be utilised in any future Classic Plus releases, if anyone wants to dust it down and finish it off. On the same theme, but on a much larger scale, is Azsgara Crater. Not a battleground, but a battlefield like Alterac Valley. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, awesome! After taking the best part of 15 years to learn how Alterac Valley even works, and to be honest, I'm still not entirely certain I know how it works, but whatever. When I spend literally days completing Alterac Valley in Classic, then what I really want, like what I really fancy at that point, what I'm really likely to be thinking in that moment is, that was a good literal days playing Alterac Valley, even though I barely knew what was going on half the time, and it's a shame we lost, but instead of eating or sleeping or going outside, what I really fancy is another epic battlefield that no one knows how to play and that will also last literal days. And if that's you, then good news, because hi, here's Azsgara Crater. And you may actually have heard of this one because it was discussed quite a bit at BlizzCon 2007, where devs said that it had been kind of put on the back burner for a bit while they focused on balancing Alterac Valley. It was actually mooted to be a feature in Mists of Pandaria, but you know, they were still balancing Alterac Valley. So, in fact, if they ever actually do get around to balancing Alterac Valley, then maybe they'll put Azsgara Basin in the live game, and we won't need a Classic Plus version anyway, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. This is as big a map as you would expect, with a really outrageous and seemingly random mix of architecture styles, probably because most of the assets in here were placeholders plopped in to fill space. And there's no clear sign of what the objectives would be, but what is interesting is the general layout. The Horde base is in the west, and the Alliance to the north, with this huge southern area down here that has no clear purpose. I'm betting there was a pretty awesome purpose planned for it though, because to get to that southern area, you have to pass through these awesome dragon gate things, which are clearly brilliant and enough reason to make this something I want in the game. I guess maybe the two armies would have to make the decision to try and take bases from the opposition, like in Alterac, or venture into this unclaimed area and try and take points there. But that would seem to really favour the Alliance, who wouldn't have to split their forces as much to do both. So honestly, I don't know. Maybe a big 300 IQ PvP brain can help me out with some ideas in the comments. But out of all of the unutilised maps that we see in this video, honestly, Azsgara Basin is my favourite. Yes, because of the dragons, obviously, but also just because, like anyone, I really like vanilla Azsgara's empty, eternal autumn vibe, and more of that is always going to be totally welcome. I'd love to see what the devs and player base could do with this battlefield if it were to ever be put into the game in some kind of Classic Plus way. Here's something that did make it into the game, but always felt very unfinished and out of place. In the southernmost corner of Winterspring, the fluffy snowy dreamscape fades into an area of ash and burny stuff filled with demons of the Burning Legion, strutting about being all naked and stuff. Fine, nothing too unusual about that. But in that area, you'll find a cavern that leads to a sealed off raid portal. A raid portal that never went anywhere at all, and which, along with the demons, disappeared in Cataclysm to be replaced by Twilight's Hammer guys, in my opinion, the most boring of all WoW bad guys of literally all time ever. Man, I hate those Twilight Hammer. But anyway, so it went from an unutilized area full of Legion baddies to an area full of old god baddies, albeit shit old god baddies. But what did Blizzard have planned for this originally? What was supposed to be on the other side of that portal? Well, in an old rough WoW development map, there is an instance mooted to be situated in that sort of area. Amberhorn Caverns, clearly situated under Mount Hyjal. In the original Hyjal build, which we said we wouldn't talk about in this video, there's a full uninstanced version of Onyxia's Lair, which is obviously a placeholder for a planned raid there. Could this portal in Winterspring have been another way into that same instance? And if it were, could Blizzard design a whole new dungeon or raid to be on the other side of it for Classic Plus? None of the actual Classic world would be changed, it would still be the exact same Legion-y area, but with a new instance on the other side of a currently, in fact, never used portal. And what would the dungeon or raid, or both, be like? Okay, I have no idea what an Amberhorn is, by the way, but it sounds cool, and it makes sense that a dungeon or raid in the caverns underneath Classic Hyjal that you need to fight your way through hordes of the Burning Legion to get to would probably be pretty heavily Burning Legion themed, right? Sargeras does, after all, have, like, Amber horns. Okay, fine, that's tenuous, but I'm trying, alright? This would be a great opportunity to expand on classic lore without that lore spreading out into or changing anything that came later, which I think is a really important part of anything that might find its way into WoW Classic. Us going in and dealing with the Legion presence in the caverns would actually help explain what happened to the demons there in Cataclysm. It would answer questions about what came in later expansions rather than ask more or retcon or, God forbid, start an alternative timeline. Or without changing even one tiny little part of the vanilla build except making that portal usable. And right now, all I want to know, probably more than anything else in the entire world, is what an Amber Horn is. Thanks. This is the big one. The Emerald Dream has been in the game files since the very beginning of World of Warcraft, and throughout the build process expanded from one small area with a few flowers marked as a raid zone to being a humongous 3 zones worth of space. It was 100% planned to be a part of vanilla World of Warcraft. It's referenced in the Wailing Caverns and in the Sunken Temple, the story of those dungeons literally setting up your eventual arrival into the Dream. And there's more set up from the Dragons of Nightmare, which in Classic will be arriving in a later phase. A vision of Malfurion says, "Within the Dream, we fight a new foe, born of ancient evil," setting up old god fun times in the Nightmare that we eventually got to in Legion 13 years later. And these massive Emerald Dream zones were still being developed just 3 months before WoW's release, eventually being scrapped when the artists just couldn't get anything to a state that they were happy with, it being so much a higher concept area than anything else in the game. And yeah, it's probably likely that we are going to be heading into the Emerald Dream in the live game at some point, so this kind of goes against my initial rule for this video. But if Blizzard are going to be making new raids for Classic Plus, the Emerald Dream would be a fitting and long-awaited completing of the circle. And I think it does need to be a raid rather than questing zones. One of the reasons those zones were scrapped so close to release was because Jeff Kaplan said that they didn't really need any new areas in the game, even high-level, exceedingly challenging ones like the Dream was meant to be. There are only so many upgrades we can give to armor sets, he explained. We really don't need more zones. And if it's good enough for Kaplan, then it's good enough for me. But an Emerald Dream raid in Classic Plus, using the concept and assets from the unfinished maps, taking on the Dragons of Nightmare, and maybe the first hints of those old gods that Malfurion refers to, I mean, I'm just saying, that would be pretty cool. It doesn't need to impact or change any of the future lore or events. It was clearly something the devs had originally planned for, and overall would fit the whole premise of what I think Classic Plus should be. If I thought Classic Plus should be a thing, which I don't, but I must admit, looking at all these unfinished maps, I'm starting to come around to the idea, in principle, just a tiny little bit. Now, the biggest question would be, of course, who would be the final boss of the new old Emerald Dream raid? I mean, I've got some ideas, but I'd really love to hear your suggestions too, to all of the things that we've touched on in this video. What do you think of the maps that I've highlighted and my suggestions for making them a part of Classic Plus? What other scrapped or unfinished zones or instances would you like to see make an appearance? Do you think that Classic Plus is even a good idea at all? Or do you think it should be avoided like the game-wrecking plague it definitely is? I would be inclined to agree with you. I can't help but think that if new content ever were put alongside Classic, it would be better if it took the form of a dungeon or raid builder tool for user-built instant content just for lols. But that said, I have really enjoyed looking at possible Classic Plus candidates here, I have to admit. Do you think Classic Plus should add whole new expansions and go off on its own decades-long direction like RuneScape? Genuinely, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all our videos happen. Without you guys, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Haven Games. No. My name is Taliesin. No weekly reset this week because of our guild holiday, which is where we go on holiday with our guild, but we'll see you next week for more news and fun stuff. So until next time, cheerio.